Welcome to The Warehouse. Have you ever heard a sermon and thought, how in the world did he discover that? Or where did he get that idea? Every week at Cornerstone Church, two teams dig into the biblical text that'll be taught during our weekend services. We spend hours talking about the text, the context, the culture of the time, you name it. But you can't stuff all that into a 30-minute message. That's where we come in. We're going to show you the stuff in the warehouse that didn't make it to the stage. Well, howdy, theologians. How are you guys doing today?
You're talking to us?
I thought you were talking to the people.
I was as well.
Oh,
Outstanding.
why?
Well, here's the thing. That's Nathan. Over there's
Hi,
Stephanie.
Nathan.
Hello.
This is Jay. Hello. Good to see you again. We wanted to start off this week by talking about kind of the nuts and bolts of what it means to dig in, what it means to exegete, and who can do it, both here around our table at the church and in general, in life, I guess, even.
Wow.
Because sometimes, people are listening and they're hearing us talk about, well, in their day, they did this, and when they write this word, it means that. And that can lead to like a disconnect between the listener and us, with somebody thinking, oof, boy, I'm glad they're doing that because I don't have what it takes to do something like that. And we are both here to tell you that thought's wrong, and we are really good examples of why that thought is wrong.
Oh, man.
You two more than me, of course, because I've got it all right up here in the old noggin. That is untrue. So what we wanted to do, first off, kind of talk through. So who are the people when we're here on Wednesday afternoons? Who are the people around the table? We could name them, but everybody's been around this table except Michael with a microphone in their hand. So just kind of let's talk about the general, the general education levels and the aptitude of the folks around the table, because we're nothing if not regular, normal readers of the Bible.
Super average.
Yes, we are super average readers of the Bible. So let's spend a few minutes. Let's just talk about that.
I think the first thing I would say is that it's a really intentional group that sits around the table on a Wednesday for exegesis. So it's not just like an open invitation or whatever, but it's like for the purpose of studying, so that Michael has good like background work done for the sermon. And the other way it's intentional is that we use it for development. So whenever we have a resident or someone who's growing in the Word, a lot of times we'll invite them into that. But it is kind of like an invitation only. But that doesn't mean that it's only the experts at the table. So I don't have a theology degree currently. I'm looking forward to hopefully going back to seminary, or not back to seminary. I've never been to seminary. Going to seminary in the spring here in just a couple of weeks. But I don't have a seminary degree. Jay, you don't have a seminary degree.
I've got one semester down.
Yeah.
No plans on getting any others.
Stephanie has at least one certificate. Do you have multiple certificates?
I have one certificate.
What was it in?
Certificate in Theological and Biblical Studies from Southeastern
That's awesome.
Southeastern
Seminary.
Seminary. Yeah,
That's
Mike.
Louisville, right?
No.
Southeastern.
That's
That's
Southern.
Southern.
Yeah.
I haven't been
There's
Baptist
a
for very
Southeastern,
long.
Southern, and Southwestern,
Mm-hmm.
and Midwestern.
Oh, yeah. I hear good things about those.
I'm still a new Baptist.
You say that a lot.
Yeah.
So you said your certificate was in Biblical and Theological Studies.
Yep.
Very cool. So yeah, around this table, you were the
Biblical
most...
Studies. Theology and Biblical Studies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So around the table, you're the most educated one of us.
Yeah.
You guys have been studying the Bible way longer than I have, though.
But you've been studying it pretty hard.
So there was one thing I wanted you to do, though, Jay or Nathan, is define theology. So because we want to say everybody is a theologian, right?
Right.
So what does it mean?
Yeah, sure. We tend to separate ourselves and say, "Oh, I'm not a theologian, so I can't dig into that. I can't go there." But really, the simple definition of a theologian is one who studies God.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so in our case, a theologian is someone who digs into the Bible and studies what God's relationship with us is and how he communicates with us through the word.
Yeah.
And it's not even just that like everyone can be a theologian if they choose to study the Bible, because the reality is like no one has a vacuum whenever they think about God. Even an atheist has an idea of who God is, and it's that he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So they're a theologian, and their study of God has convinced them that he is non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's no such thing as, not having theology. It's just whether it's going to be informed by who God says he is in his word, or by what we see around us, or what we just can come to with our natural senses.
That's good.
And so you were also asking like what we do in prep, right?
Yeah.
Was that one of the questions?
Yeah. And one of the things that really popped in as we were just talking now is that the most educated person at the table since I've been coming, has always been Michael, our lead pastor.
Yeah.
And yet he still invites those of us who aren't.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Yeah, he just really demonstrates humility with that, and
Yeah.
love it.
And the fact that he does reference things that we say from the platform is also remarkable.
He could totally do it without us, but he chooses that he wants to do it with us,
Yeah.
and would say that it makes him better, and it does. But it's like he's got his doctorate, like he could just do it.
Yeah.
But
And yet he doesn't.
it's better in community.
Ooh, life is better. Theology is better in community. So when we're prepping, I can go, and it kind of follows the same route that we take. I take the big idea out because that always comes for me last, probably the same for you guys. But I just, I usually do a simple Google context. So today we're in Matthew 22. So context of Matthew 22. And if anything cool pops up, or when we were in the Revelation series, I'm like, what was Ephesus and what happened in Ephesus? Things like that. And then just looked for some reputable sources. So,
How do you know they're reputable?
yeah, I think I'd look for anything but like stevesopinion.blogspot.com. I'm not hanging out with Steve very often, but I've used the Encyclopedia Britannica's website for things. I go to Wikipedia for things because Wikipedia has become something that even colleges, universities are okay with.
Yeah, it used to be a joke, right? And now it's actually kind of more reputable.
Especially with footnotes that they have, and then so chase down some of their footnotes. Having the ability to Google anything in the world and have that information pop into your computer is remarkable. And it increases the ability for us all to increase our theologianosity. Huh?
Yeah.
No?
Such a
Theologianosity?
job you
Maybe.
did there.
So you
like
start
it?
with Googling context.
I start Googling context and then read through and also we need to plug one of the classes that Stephanie's been doing recently, because the first time we did How to Study the Bible, it was one of the classes that you offered really early on when we started the Institute process. Was that inductive?
Yep.
Yeah, inductive Bible study that you guys taught the room, and you're starting, I think, this weekend,
January 22nd.
So next weekend you're starting another one. That really helped by looking into the literature of things and finding common things in the literature and things you want to chase down. And then I go over to Bible Hub and I just go verse by verse, looking through the original language and seeing what those words are and what the ideas were, and go different versions of the Bible. We use the ESV predominantly in our teachings, and yet I'll go and get on a parallel and look at how other versions have interpreted, translated that section. And that's what I do. And then a lot of times I'll think of a reference to a movie from my youth and seamlessly fit it in.
And then you're done.
And then I'm out.
Yeah.
How about
Your
you?
main contribution. How about you, Stephanie?
Oh, me? So I do a lot of context work. I like to
Is that the first thing you do? So you find out the
Yeah.
passage and then you look at the context?
Yeah. Normally I always stick with context first and I figure out like what's going on. So specifically looking at Matthew chapter 22, there's things that happen before this chapter and there's things that happen after this chapter.
And so context, we look at a couple different contexts, a couple different areas of
That's good.
context, right?
Yeah. So like in this part, Matthew he's delivering a part that Jesus, wait. Where are we at? Sorry, I'm thinking of with Jesus talking. And so he's already in Jerusalem right now. He's already done the famous table flip. And so just kind of already knowing a little bit, and we've been talking a lot about Matthew's chapter with us going through it for the Advent series. And we get to see in the beginning of this chapter I'm thinking of.
Oh, a different study?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. It happens, guys. I study the Bible a lot. So like not like in a weird way, but like this is one of the things I do is I study. So my brain is like mixing two chapters together. So in the beginning of this chapter is with the Sadducees. So anyways, I dig into that part. And so learning who the Sadducees were and the Pharisees and
Yeah. So and Revelation is another good example. So when we're talking about in the context in that series, we were talking about the context of what happened previously in Revelation. We talked about previously in the New Testament, and then what some of the images and what some of the different phrases and stuff, how they came from the Old Testament. So we're looking at the context biblically, but also looking at the context in the world.
Yeah.
Geographically, politically, the other religiously in the areas as well. So that's been one of the I think things that has helped my understanding of what's going on in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, when the Bible really focuses on sexual purity versus sexual immorality, and then tying that back into how other religions in the area that they were dealing with worshipped their gods with sexual immorality. And so learning about that and learning how the gospel came in and penetrated those areas, and then them talking about those differences, that's really, really made the Bible come alive for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How about you?
So for me, it's interesting. Mine is very much like yours, except I do something different first. So I almost always will read the text, like just for what it says multiple times first. And I think for me, it's largely because of like, and not saying that you guys don't hold to this at all, but I'm like very convinced of the clarity of Scripture, or another way of saying it is the perspicuity of Scripture.
Ooh.
That's good.
That's
a famous
$10 word.
Yeah, I take back everything I said. We are expert theologians. We use big words.
And it's just the idea that like everything that we need to know about life and salvation can be gleaned by the average reader without knowing all that stuff. So a lot of times I will try to approach it just for what does this text say several times first. And then, so I literally will sit down and just read it top to bottom, top to bottom, top to bottom. And then I will go do and start the same process that you guys do.
So I do that as well.
Nice.
So before I come to work, that's what I do is I listen to it while I'm getting ready.
What we're going to study that day?
Yeah.
Ah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good way to go. Might steal that.
Yeah. And then after that, it's a lot of just, so I'll check out the context of the book that we're going to be studying. A lot of times for me, that's just watching the Bible Project video.
Oh, man.
It's so helpful.
That's a good one.
Or I've got an ESV study Bible. It's just what somebody got me at some point, and I like it in general, and I'll read the book intro. Or sometimes I will also look up the context for the book of Matthew or whatever book we're studying, and just read about it. And then I'll dive into the text and I'll jot down any questions I have as I'm reading. And then I'll look up answers to those questions. I like to check cross references because, again, like one of my favorite things is the way Scripture interprets other Scripture. So whenever we're looking at a word or a phrase or an idea, to see what's the Bible say about this in other places is really helpful. And then I come to my big idea after that.
So talk about the difference between footnotes, cross references that you'll find in a study Bible.
So a footnote is usually it will be like where at the bottom of the page it will show you like, hey, this phrase it could also mean this because it's a Greek word that has two different meanings, or because there were two different like iterations of a manuscript or something, and one manuscript says this and one manuscript says it's slightly different. So like this is the way that the majority of the manuscripts have it, but some of them say this. And those are the kinds of footnotes. And then cross-references specifically will be where it's got a little letter beside a phrase or a word, and then over in the side, usually it will say, it'll say 2 Samuel 2, and then you can go look that up, or if you're using software, a lot of times you'll just be able to hover over it and it will pull it up. And so cross-references are just showing other places in the Bible that it talks about that.
Awesome.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
I think that's one of my most important bits of any kind of advice is do this in community, which is super important, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. I remember coming out of the Christology series last year where we were talking about different stories that pointed to Jesus in the Old Testament. We were talking about, I think it was Jonah, and how the sailors that he sailed with were later worshiping Jehovah. And we've transitioned into the Joseph series, and I was looking and I saw none of these people are talking about Jehovah Yahweh. None of these people are talking about Yahweh. What is going on? And I brought it, and I was so proud of myself. I can't believe none of these people are talking about Yahweh. And then we're halfway into the meeting, and I realize God hasn't introduced himself as Yahweh yet.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen until Exodus. And
did you realize it internally, or did somebody call you on it?
Oh, no. I realized it as I was saying it. That was my favorite. So, yeah, don't be afraid about making mistakes, because you're going to.
Yeah, there are plenty of times in a meeting. And sometimes that's just like, it just demonstrates the fact that we're normal people studying it. There's plenty of times where it's like, I say something, and then there's kind of a little bit of a lull in the room, or a couple people like start typing on their computer. I'm like, oh no, what did I say?
Somebody found the wrong thing.
And then they're like, hey, where are you getting that? Yeah. Which is a gracious way of saying like, you have no idea what you're talking about, Nathan.
I think I mentioned it to Michael yesterday that it gives me pause when I see him take his glasses off and go into his Bible. Because usually he's taking notes on his computer. But when he goes into his Bible and takes his glasses off, I'm like, oh, no.
I said something heretical. That's normally...
I don't go all the way to heresy.
Oh, I do. I'm like, dang it, Jay said something heretical.
Jay specifically, not you. Okay.
That has to be heresy. Let me find out how.
Stephanie just goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, like a Tesla.
That's exactly right. On a summer day.
I know I'm totally overthinking this, but I don't study the Bible a lot. Like I said that all because I got my...
You feeling a little holier than thou for just a second?
Yes, I didn't want people to think that I thought that for a minute.
I study the Bible so much.
No, it's just...
I balance her out.
Been in Matthew a lot, so I got confused on text.
Yes.
So I apologize if anybody for a second thought I was thinking...
People were probably super offended by that.
Okay.
Well, I guess if you have complaints, send them to
warehouse
to the garbage bin, because we love Stephanie.
Right in the bin.
Right in the bin.
Are we ready to get started?
Yeah. All that to say. Jump in, check it out, read stuff. I'm telling you. See, oh man, we need to plug, I think, harder the Bible Project and how eye-opening their videos, and I've been enjoying their podcasts lately too.
Yeah.
Man, oh man.
Super good. If you look on our resources page, though, they get plugged every single week. Yeah. So, and I always make sure to do like the Bible Project. So the link will take you to the Bible Project page, not just YouTube.
Yeah.
So
cornerstonechurch.community and find the resources page.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I even did one for Shema.
Yeah.
Which brings us right into our text for today.
Matthew 22, 34 to 40. with a flyover of Deuteronomy 6, because we've got some cross references in Deuteronomy 6 from Matthew 22. So what, Stephanie, was your big idea for this week's scripture?
If we truly love God and our neighbor, we naturally will keep the commandments.
Ooh,
Boom.
nice.
Mine was obedience to God boils down to loving him and loving people.
Man, pretty good. I wrote
Wow. Pretty good?
Yeah, hers was good. Yours is pretty good.
Okay,
Pretty good.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Mine was agape is the commandment. That was a good one, Jay. Thanks, man.
You're welcome.
You did so good.
How about context in Matthew 22? Also, this is the point in the meetings when we're in the exegesis meetings ourselves, when Michael asks, all right, let's talk about the context. Everybody leans back in their chair and we look at Stephanie
Ah, haha.
because she usually brings it with some context.
This chapter extends an exchange between Jesus and several groups of religious leaders in the temple. The previous chapter concluded with 2 parables about the failures of the religious leaders. This chapter begins with the 3rd parable about chosen guests who refuse to attend a wedding feast. Jesus then fields questions from several religious groups who fall in their attempts to trip him up. His wise, profound answers silence all of them. At this point, Jesus launches into a full-throated condemnation of the Pharisees in chapter 23. So, who are the Pharisees?
It does feel like you said, did you say full-throated?
Yeah, maybe.
Like, is that a full-throated defense?
Maybe.
Oh, full-throated.
Oh, see?
It's okay.
Yeah,
So they launched a full-throated
that
defense.
thing.
So good.
Man, that's good. Also, so earlier in the chapter, Jesus had set toward Jerusalem. So that's halfway through chapter 20. Luke 9 is mirroring this story. And Luke 9 says that Jesus set his face toward Jerusalem. Like he set out with resolve that he had been telling his disciples what was going to happen once they get to Jerusalem. And now he's set his face toward it. He has set himself like a dad getting his family to their vacation destination with as little bathroom breaks as possible.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, there's
Full-throttled.
There's some conviction behind that. I saw it in your eyes. This is a real experience for you. Yeah, I love to see when we're studying a story like this. I love to see it just anchored in the bigger story of what's happening. So thanks for bringing that up as far as like where we're at, that Jesus now has his eyes set on Jerusalem. It's like we are in the final stretch. He's no longer kind of wandering around and healing a person here and teaching a little bit there and stuff. Not that any of it was unintentional, but it definitely had a little bit more of like you felt some of the him traveling and journeying and just mixing and mingling with people. And now he's got like this singular focus of going to the cross.
Yeah.
And you have things heating up significantly. The conflict is getting very real. There's some feathers that have been ruffled that are now like resulting in the Pharisees trying to entrap him.
Yeah. Oh man.
And this is something they did a lot. Like they would ask a question, and what they're looking for, like it would be a question where they think that he has to answer in a way that's going to make him either be siding with one party and alienating the other, or doing the reverse. But they don't see any way that he can get out of this, that his answer is going to turn away at least half of the people that are following him.
Yeah.
And he is just masterful at being able to answer in a way that does not give them what they want, but is true to who God is.
You had mentioned earlier that Olive has a tendency to ask you questions, get you to get the right answer.
Yeah. Olive, my 3-year-old, her name's Olivia, and we call her Olive. And she's just recently started this, and it cracks me up. She'll be like, "Hey, Dad, are we gonna watch a movie tonight or yes?" And I just love it because she's only giving me one option, but it makes it sound like she's trying to actually ask my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like she actually cares if you're gonna
Right.
disagree or not.
Yeah. because she's wanting to watch that movie.
I think Parker said it yesterday. This is one of like the parts where Jesus responds and actually gives an answer, where mostly, if we look at parables or, him being asked questions, he responds with a question or to bring back to them.
Good job, Parker. I thought that was a fun observation.
All right. Matthew 22. Let's go. How about 34 to 38? Is that a good distinction, or you just want to roll through it all?
I think we can roll through it all.
Ooh.
But I just wanted to, so leading into this one part, we would have thought that the Pharisees would have been glad to see that Sadducees were silenced right before this. Jesus finally answered the question that the Sadducees has always used to trap the Pharisees, but the Pharisees were too proud and too impressed Jesus' answers gave them theological victory over the Sadducees, but they were more interested in defeating Jesus than learning the truth. So just leading into that text, the Pharisees and the Sadducees would have been at odds against one another, but they both had one common enemy, which was Jesus. And so instead of them being excited that Jesus defeated the one argument that they would have had, they are too focused on still bringing Jesus down. So just leading into that part.
I think we've mentioned this before, but the Pharisees and Sadducees, they did not like each other.
Right.
But the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Right.
And so here they are. And the way that Jesus answered them right before our text now, he tells them, you are wrong because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. And
woo!
I mean,
shots fired.
Yamahama. So 34 to 40. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Ooh. Let's hit it. What do you guys have?
So you have a crowd of people gathered, including all these religious leaders. And you have there's this sense that as they're gathered together, that this lawyer has been put up to it. Like it's not just that he steps forward, but that he's being intentionally given the task of trying to trap Jesus. And for me, this is a little bit like, I felt a little silly for acknowledging this, but I haven't really thought a lot about what a lawyer was to them. And so I just assumed like, okay, smart person who, deals with the court, knows how to like interpret laws. So it makes sense that he's talking about laws. And I hadn't thought about that their law was the Old Testament. So it's not just that this person was well-versed in law in general. It was in specific that he was very well-versed in the Torah.
Yeah, the law. Yeah, I had read something on that too, that other versions would call him an expert in the law. And that would kind of help that thinking at least. And they say that the word suggests the thought of a section of the scribes who confine their attention to the law, while others included in their studies also the writings of the prophets as well. So the Old Testament being divided into the Torah, the law, the first 5 books, the writings, and the prophets. Yeah. And so these guys were specifically focused in on those first 5 books, the law, the Torah.
Right, which is really significant given what we're getting ready to go into. I mean, this is their life's work, is to study the first 5 books of the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah, he spends his days debating which are the greatest laws, which are the greatest commandments.
So with that, the Sadducees only recognized the first 5 books of the Bible, where the Pharisees looked at the whole Old Testament, so the prophets and the law. So that would have been the whole Old Testament. And then with the Pharisees, didn't you say, Nathan, they added on extra laws to the laws, like to make the laws even more?
Right. So there's 613 laws in the Old Old Testament, and the Pharisees had created thousands of laws around those 613 to further define them.
Yeah, isn't that like, man, that's such a hard thing to be doing around people, and it was to make them more righteous, right?
Mm. Oh, up in verse 34, when talked about when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, it was kind of more than he had just won a debate with them and they didn't have an answer. The word means to muzzle. And one of the commentaries I found said, the primary meaning of the Greek verb is to stop a man's power of speaking with a gag. And even in its wider use, it retains the sense of putting men to a coerced and unwilling silence. And it's the same word that Peter uses in 1 Peter 2:15, when he says, for this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people, so that you would muzzle the ignorance of foolish people. So the Pharisees heard that Jesus had muzzled the Sadducees. They gathered together and put up this expert in the law to test him.
Yeah, which the word test there just means like to tempt, to examine, to try him. So he's like putting him to the test to see if he's going to pass. And he asked him, which is the great commandment in the law. So they were constantly debating regarding like which commandments were light, which ones were weighty. And so this was something that they genuinely would have wanted to ask him to see like, okay, Jesus, which side are you going to say? Which one is the most important to you? And again, he crushes it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the ways, so one of the other places that you see this, like this idea of some laws being weighty is whenever Jesus is referencing, like in some of his woes to the Pharisees, he says, for you, woe to you Pharisees, and for you tithe mint and dill and cumin. Sorry about that. Cumin?
I say cumin.
Yeah, Q or coup. I say coup.
Just not the way I said it.
Yeah.
Cumin.
Yeah.
And have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. And so he's giving a little bit of credence to this idea that like, hey, I mean, you're focusing on this one law, but there's weightier or more important things that you're totally neglecting.
Mm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I found it interesting also that which is the great commandment? Like that sentence would have read, of what sort? Like from this idea of individualizing what sort of, right? Like what sort of commandment? Which commandment? Well, so like you're talking 613 that they were using. And when you were up speaking a couple weeks back, you had mentioned one of the commandments they had about the Sabbath that they had broken down, and they had added on to so many of these things. And it's kind of that idea of, yeah, we've done all this. Well, which sort of these is the most important?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's like whenever they're talking about the great commandment, so that the Greek word there is like basically the word mega. So the biggest or the greatest, the grandest. And so with that, they're looking for like, is there one that you could say kind of encapsulates a number of them that you'd say like kind of gives the best representation? So it's probably not, how much of your mint, dill, and cumin you should tithe. Like that would be one of the lesser ones. So what would you say is the big daddy of laws?
Mm-hmm.
The mega commandment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When the Power Rangers got together. Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to watch.
Voltron.
I wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers.
Ooh. What, Voltron?
Yeah, I never seen
No
Voltron.
Voltron either. Man, oh man. That's the mega hero.
Hero or villain? Hero?
Either. No, Voltron was a hero.
Okay. Sorry for all of you actual Power Rangers fans out there. I have a feeling that Jay is out of his depth right now.
Way out of his
I have
depth.
no idea what I'm talking about.
Way out of his depth.
So we apologize. Again, you can take those complaints and You know what to do with them.
Right in the bin.
Right in the bin.
We've turned a corner here on the warehouse.
So the love there, Jay, is that
A love that would not put it in the bin.
I'm gonna bring us back here. The love
Stephanie.
there in verse 37, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind. What's the love there mean?
Ooh.
Isn't this where your big idea?
It was. You shall agape the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. It's that highest form of love, the self-sacrificing love that Jesus showed toward us.
Mm-hmm. And in verse 39 as well, that same love is used.
Yeah.
So it's not the Philadelphia.
It's not Philadelphia freedom.
Cream cheese.
It's not Philadelphia cream cheese.
Phileo, right?
Phileo
I mean, it's the same
love.
root. It's the same root.
I know, brotherly love type love here. Yeah.
Or
Whew.
eros is the like erotic, sexual kind of love, romantic love.
Mhm.
There's 4 of them.
Storge is like a parental.
Thank you.
How did it go? Good
Just
job.
Came right out.
Yeah.
That was really
Nicely
good. I was
done.
getting ready to look up notes.
I didn't know where that came from.
That was
Oh,
good.
man.
And then agape is
So-
that unconditional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice one. Yeah.
So this call here is not for us to just love our neighbor as our brother or our sister.
Mm.
It is an unconditional type of love that we're supposed to love the Lord and to love those around us.
Yeah. And it would have been, I think it would have been revolutionary as well, just to say, you shall brotherly love your neighbor, because we don't brotherly love our neighbors.
No.
But Jesus goes that step further and says, you shall God love your neighbor,
Mhm.
right? You shall sacrificially love them.
Mhm.
That's good.
And then when we've got that, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, we could try to parse out what each of those means. And they would have some nuance to them, but they're not clean delineations in between them. And so really it's not like that's not designed to say like, you know what, I'm loving God with my heart and my mind, but not my soul.
Yeah.
It's designed as a way of saying with everything you got.
Yeah.
Like every part of you. There's no part of you that you can say, you know what, I'm okay with not loving God in that area of my life.
Mhm.
It has to be all encompassing.
Yeah. It's to worship him as a whole person, as it's added there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this would have been known as the Shema, right? It was from Deuteronomy 6:5.
Yep.
Faithful Jews would recite this multiple times a day. I think twice a day, though, right? For sure. But
And when you say this would have been, so this
they probably still
This-
do it, don't they?
this phrase, so this love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. That's what you're saying specifically. And
Yes.
it's from Deuteronomy 6, right?
Yes.
And so it's not just that phrase. This phrase is part of the
Part
Shema.
of the entire.
which I loved the Bible Project video on Shema. What I think Stephanie's having an epiphany over
Yeah.
here.
It's the whole
Yes.
chapter?
Yes, the whole thing is the Shema, and this is one of the lines from the Shema.
That's neat.
Okay, sweet.
Sorry, guys.
See, we're always learning.
Yeah.
Always
I
I
learning.
Our-
love to learn.
Our brains get blown out on several occasions.
Yes. So Shema in Hebrew means to hear. Interestingly, it also means to obey.
Mm.
And there is no separate word in Hebrew for obey. So whenever you read, like I went through and checked, and whenever you see the word, obey the commands of your Lord, of the Lord your God, in the Old Testament, it also is Shema. So whenever it's here, it's not just like, okay, I'm listening. What you got to say in one ear, out the other ear. It's not just about let these sound waves impact your
Mhm.
eardrum.
Right.
It's not even just hear and understand,
Yeah.
but it's hear, understand, and obey.
Mm. Yeah.
That's
So
big.
just say, oh man, that's a good teaching. That's a
Yeah.
good word. That's not Shema.
Right. And so we don't see that Shema word in Matthew, but whenever you go back and check Deuteronomy 6 that he's pulling from, that has it all over the place.
Oh man.
That's awesome.
And before we do a flyover of Deuteronomy 6, a second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go. So we just finished Romans. I'm trying to
12,
make
1 and 2.
Yep. And the therefore there was like hinging all of chapters 1 through 11 for Romans and then 12 onto the end. And this to me yesterday when we were going through it, these 2 commandments are the greatest because all scripture hangs on them. Mm-hmm. Nothing in scripture can cohere or be truly obeyed unless these 2 are observed. Love is the primary hermeneutical principle for interpreting and applying the law. The entire biblical revelation demands heart religion marked by total allegiance to God, loving Him and loving one's neighbor. Without these 2 commandments, the Bible is sterile. Oh, I just love that. Like if we didn't, like that to me is huge. Like if we don't love God and we don't love others, like the Bible is nothing. Mm-hmm. Like it's like anyways.
It's a best-selling book in history and that's it. Just a book.
It reminds me a lot of 1 Corinthians 13, right? Where you have this list of, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm a resounding gong. And then this whole list of amazing things that you could do. But if you take love out of it, then
it's nothing.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just, okay. So love is the greatest commandment, but is not the only one. And the and applicability of their commandments cannot be decided by appeal is paramount demand. The question of the continuity, I cannot talk. Mm-hmm.
It's all right.
Discontinuity of the Old Testament law within the teaching of Jesus is determined not with reference to the love commands but by salvation, historical perspective, focusing on prophecy and fulfillment. I messed those words up.
It's fine. Can you summarize? Like what is it that hit you about that?
Just like if we're not loving people and if we're not viewing like just what you were saying with 1 Corinthians, like nothing else matters. Mm-hmm. Like the reason that we worship on Sundays or throughout the week, it doesn't matter if we're not loving God and if we're not worshiping Him, if we're not getting into our Bible and understanding who God is. And then which in turn has us loving those around us, right? Like our kids, our friends, serving one another, connecting. Yeah. So she's good.
When you were growing up, did you guys sing "They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love"?
By our love?
By our love.
They'll know we are Christians by our love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That old song popped into my head just then.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
We grew up in different
environments.
Yeah.
Whenever he says a second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So whenever we get these 2, it is pretty amazing as you go back through. You could just take the 10 commandments and look at them as a starting place, as like the big 10, and they all fit into one of these 2 categories, either the loving God or loving others. And you start to see that you're like, wow, Jesus, that makes a whole lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Like if I rather than thinking I got to keep 613, how do I even remember all those, let alone keep all of them? He's saying, there's 2. Yeah. 2 big ones that encompass everything else.
Yeah. Don't focus on the things you cannot do. Focus on the thing that you can do, which is love me.
And at the same time, as we talked about some yesterday, so it's like, yes, it's simple enough to be able to understand, like, okay, I need to love God. I can do that. But as we see it, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And it's like, ooh, I cannot do that for like any period of time to say that every bit of my being is fully devoted to God.
Yeah, it's simple, but it ain't easy.
So it's like impossible, right? Yeah. To live a life where that's every moment of your existence except Jesus.
Yeah.
He's the only one who's ever done it.
But in all honesty, there's definitely been days where I'm like, man, I did really good today. But then I try to reflect and I start to reflect on the things that I've done throughout the day. I'm like, yeah, never mind. I totally did not hit that mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's humbling.
And then we have that, you should love your neighbor as yourself. So some people try to take this and make this, 2 separate commands, love your neighbor and love yourself. And that's not really what Jesus is doing here. It is built on a foundation or this assumption that we already love ourselves. And that's not, there are definitely exceptions to that. There are people who sit in self-loathing and stuff. And he's not saying that no one ever is in that spot, but on the whole, humans take care of themselves first.
Right.
It's kind of built into us. And he's saying the same way that you intuitively know what you need, you should have that same kind of intuition toward your neighbor and be thinking for them. Anything that you think you would do for yourself, you would you would do whatever it takes to escape that burning building. So you should do whatever it takes to get your neighbor out of that burning building and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's similar to whenever in Ephesians 5, it's talking about husbands, love your wives as you love your own body, that kind of thing.
Man, that's good. All right. You guys ready to fly over Deuteronomy 6?
Yes.
Seat backs and tray tables in your upright positions.
Well, the only thing we didn't get to here is from a storyline perspective. It's really interesting. Like, one of the major discussions we had yesterday is like, why is this such a big deal? Because as we looked at it, there seemed to be other theologians, rabbi at the time, who were saying something similar to Jesus. Jesus is not throwing out a totally new idea that these two are the big two and everything else falls into those categories. And so we had some debate about like, so why is this new? And we didn't really exactly land like with some consensus. I felt like we had a couple ideas.
Yeah.
Did you feel the same way?
I kind of did.
I wanted it to be one of those like Jesus blowing their minds moments, and they're like, I've never thought about that, but it doesn't seem like that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. You want it to be you've heard it said, but I tell you, moment, like in the Beatitudes or one of those mic drop moments that Jesus has. But I guess it's the same because it's been this from Deuteronomy 6. This has been the message, and we've convoluted it and we've complicated it, and then we've forgotten it. But this has been the message.
Yeah. Yep. I also think there's the possibility that like maybe they did understand them to be the two greats, but they had not connected the dots that everything else flows from these. And we were talking about maybe the nuance when he says this is the great and first commandment. So that great still is mega, but first is like basically the Greek word proto, or the prefix proto, and it means that like everything kind of flows from it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the nuance. I don't know. So
I may be taking this a different way. So if I am, you guys can totally call me out on it. But in this, if it's something that they have heard before, you shall love your Lord, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, which is from the Shema, from Deuteronomy 6. But the second part is not in there. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So maybe the surprise and the hitting point is not him encapsulating the first part, but it's the second part. Because out of loving God, you are going to love those around you. Yeah, it's possible. I did, like when I was studying, I did see some other rabbi from the time who were putting both together. Oh, okay. But I don't know. Yeah, because just from Deuteronomy 6, it doesn't say the second part. Right, that's in Leviticus 19, right? Yep. Okay, sorry. Thanks for letting me take us back there for just a second. It's just one of those like story points whenever you're trying to understand the significance of this that I think it's worth drawing out.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Deuteronomy 6.
I think it's a good place to land after we fly over it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh, so circle it a couple times.
Yeah. So Deuteronomy 6 is big. So I thought we could just eat just popcorn and
take our highlighting points.
Yeah.
So this in chapter 5 of Deuteronomy is whenever they hear the commandments again, they're laid out. And so it starts with, now this is the commandment, that statutes and rules. And so that's kind of leading it up and putting it up. And he talks about the land that they have promised with flowing with milk and honey. So we got to really talk about that yesterday. So the flowing in that phrase means gush or to ooze. The picture then is a land with lots of fertility, having abundant rain, good soil, healthy and productive animals. So where Egypt may have had like the caviar and the champagne, because this is where they would have been coming out of. but it was also a land of slavery, where this land, on the other hand, was like icing on the cake. This is where Yahweh would imply to bless the land so long as Israel honored the Lord appropriately within it, only with their obedience. And therefore, Israel enjoyed the land's full potential as long as life was within it.
Yeah.
So you were talking about, Jay, yesterday, like you never thought of it like this, like with the milk flowing.
Yeah, I just, a land oozing with milk and honey. Maybe in this instance, the English was right that flowing is a better
What
way
about
to go.
gushing?
Or gushing. Yeah. I never connected the dots that a land flowing with milk meant there were some healthy cows there.
Yeah.
And that meant that the ground was healthy because the pastures were good and green and the cattle were getting what they needed. I never connected those dots. I just always pictured it as this like just this word picture that the honey and milk were flowing because they were in
Great abundance.
Great abundance, that there was a ton because the people were blessed. And I didn't just connect that to mean, oh yeah. That meant the ground was blessed, that the animals were blessed, that everything would be going great because they were going to take their love for God and each other into this promised land.
Yeah.
And I think this is partially significant because this is God's covenant with his people, that if they obey him, their side of the covenant is to keep the commands. And if they do that, then he's going to bless them with this amazing land. And that's kind of a foreshadowing for us, right? Of what heaven's going to be like, that it's going to be a land of abundance and fulfillment, and it's going to be enjoyable for anyone who can keep the law. But then we have this amazing, like we get to look back and see that, well, we can't keep the law, but Jesus did for us. And so when our faith is in him, we have this promise of entering into the kind of abundance that they had in Canaan.
Yeah. So just a little context piece leading up to this, which for those who may not have read the Old Testament. So Moses has just taken the people out of the land of Egypt. They've been in wandering. Yeah, that's the right word. Yeah. And so Moses is overlooking. I think you could do this better, Nathan.
No, that's fine. You're doing great. So yeah, like the Israelites have left the land of Egypt. They went out to Mount Sinai. He got the law there. They went to the border of Canaan and they sent in spies. And the spies said, the people here are too big. Everybody except Joshua and Caleb said that. And so they didn't believe the Lord that they could go in and take it. And so God said, nope, you're going to wander around in the wilderness for 40 years until you die. And then the only people from this group that's going to be able to go in is Joshua and Caleb. Yeah. Even Moses himself, he didn't get to go in. So then they wander around for 40 years in this, in the wilderness and come back to the border of Canaan. And Moses reiterates the law. And that's what Deuteronomy is. It's so the prefix there, do, I don't know how, do, DEU, it means two. And so it's actually the second law is what Deuteronomy means. It's his second giving of the law.
Oh, that's good.
And so he's refreshing their memory on everything before they walk in.
Yeah. And Moses is seeing the land though.
Yes. He sees it like from a mountaintop and everything, but he doesn't get to go in.
Right.
Yeah.
He goes on the mountain and dies.
It is something though. Joshua and Caleb were the ones that said, no. We can take these guys. We got God with us. And then a generation later, Caleb especially says, no, I'll take that high hill country because I'm going to conquer that too because, God's with me. Give it to me. I'm old. Give that to me. I'm going to take it.
Yep. So this is the generation that was like, they were either babies or like very small children or not born whenever Israel came, the first time to Canaan, whenever they got the law for the first time. So this is Moses giving his like refresher course on what it means to follow the Lord.
Yeah. So with all of that, like in verse 10, with great and good cities that you did not build. So he's talking about like, I have made this land great for you. So just kind of reiterating that part. But verses 4 through 9 is the hear, O Israel.
Yep.
That's so good.
And I thought it was so, sorry, I think I cut you off, Jay.
No, you're fine.
Stephanie, you were and we talked about this as a group yesterday about how one of the reasons they need to be reminded is not because it's getting ready to get hard, but because it's getting ready to get real easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're getting ready to walk in and there's milk and honey everywhere. The land's plentiful. There's houses just ready to be inhabited. Like they're not even going to have to build them. And they've been living in tents. And so now they're not like extreme. They've been living intense lives. No, they've been living in literal tents.
In camping tents.
In camping tents. Yes, thank you.
Teepees.
And so he's saying you're going to walk in and life's going to get real easy for you and you're going to be tempted to forget me because you don't have to depend on me every day for your manna anymore.
Yeah. And so verse 5 is what Jesus quotes. You shall love the Lord your... Mostly quotes because there is a bit of a change there, but you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might is what this chapter says. And then he spends the rest of his time talking about the practices that the people should take part in so that they remember to love God with everything they have. So he's going to tell them to keep retelling the story, to teach the children, to bind these things to their lives, keep remembering, don't chase other gods, don't put them to the test, keep the commandments, do what is right and good. Follow these practices so that your hearts stay tuned in on me.
Love it.
And then verse 12, take care lest you forget. That take care to build a hedge about, to guard, to protect. So guard these things so you don't forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery.
Yep.
That hit me hard. And it is good to remember that this chapter holds two of the answers that Jesus gives the tempter in the wilderness. Mm-hmm. That here, verse 13, it's the Lord your God you shall fear, him you shall serve, and by his name you shall swear. And then over in verse 16, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test, as you tested him at Massah. That's just a chapter jam-packed full of goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said it yesterday, Jay. You're like, if you want to memorize, one chapter in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, it's like, should probably be this one.
This is a good one to do.
It's a good one.
Yeah. And then that third answer comes from Deuteronomy 8:3. The third answer Jesus gives about man not living by bread alone. That one's Deuteronomy 8:3. What else do you guys have about Deuteronomy?
Nothing for me.
I'm looking. There's
so much there.
I know. I have so many little notes, and I'm like, is this even valid or important? Is it anything?
It's probably valid.
Well, yeah, but important that adds to the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting to know, though, that even as he's telling them this, he's also saying, you're going to forget this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it. Yeah. This is what you must do this to stay with me, to love me. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that, it really has nothing to do with this, but I'm thinking of them being able to finally go into the promised land, and they've been packing up the tabernacle, putting it all together and then taking it all down and then putting it all up. So just the thought of them having a permanent place to put the tabernacle, I don't know. Just think it's neat.
Settle in.
Yeah, they get to settle because they've been just keeps going. So there's a lot of rich little nuggets in here, and just recommend you read it.
Save it for Stephanie's Nuggets.
Nugs with Stephanie.
The next podcast.
The next podcast will launch.
Nugs with Stephanie.
Nugs with Stephanie.
And I'll have my chicken nugget on here.
Yep.
Full circle.
Double entendre.
Whoa.
Yep.
We usually only operate in single entendres.
Guys, listen. I feel like this is very important.
I'm
my
listening.
chickens
Shema.
have started laying eggs. Only one of them has. And she's been really faithful to us.
Wow.
I know. In the middle of this winterness, she's laying us eggs.
Yeah. That peer pressure is going to spread, though, because others are going to start.
It's going to be Rachel and Leah's situation.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait.
Way to tie that back.
Yeah, you're
Way to tie it back. All right, guys. Anything else?
No, I think people needed to know about my chickens.
Yeah. Well, I also have chickens that lay eggs.
But mine are cool.
I don't.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Get in your Bibles. Man, that's the...
Ask us questions about the Bible. Like not
me, them.
Yeah.
Or you
listeners.
can ask questions too, Jay.
Well, thanks. I'll come up with a
I love
few.
to ask questions.
But yeah, ask questions, make comments. Man, text us even if you have.
We're not going to
put our we're not going to put our personal numbers out there. But if you have them, shoot us some texts because those are some of my favorite. Some of my favorite things is when people just catch you at the door or in the room. It's been fun talking to people about what they heard and then what they double checked in the Bible and things they're reading. So dive in your Bibles, hop on the Google machine and dig in because you're a theologian. Go to it.
Yeah.
And again, any questions, any comments, any concerns, any requests for Stephanie's eggs? She might sell them to you. She might sell them to you when they get enough. You can email us at warehouse@cornerstone.team. I tell you what, we'll see you on the flip side.
Yeah.
Say bye, Nathan.
Bye.
Bye.